Hey, what's going on, guys? Today's video, I'm gonna go a bit deeper into the whole how to have pure thoughts in your mind, because I notice when I look at my analysis for my channel, those kinds of videos tend to get, ironically enough, the most views. Um, and I guess that's a good thing because maybe there's a lot of people who really struggle with this issue and they are trying to figure out a way on how to think better about these topics and not just constantly have recycling sexual thoughts in their heads, because there are, I guess, many people who have been addicted to these things for 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40 years, and they just don't know how to defeat this issue, and it's just almost like consume them, anyways, some of the first of all, I think a lot of people don't understand really how to master this thing. This skill, by the way, it's not any different than having skills in other areas, right? There's a lot of overlap. So in order for you to really fine tune your thinking when it comes to sexuality is, first of all, this is the biggest myth that people assume. In order for you to be quote unquote good at this thing, you have to just not think about sex at all whatsoever. It shouldn't even cross your mind. Um, Let me tell you guys, I don't know anybody who's like that. I really, really don't know not even one person, including myself, who thinks like that. Nobody thinks like that, guys. We think about sex because it is wired into our biology. We are driven to reproduce, right? So that is a normal instinct, first of all. There's nothing shameful about that. It's kind of like being ashamed of having the desire to eat or to drink or to sleep or to build intimacy with others. Most of us don't even feel shame about those things. We just take it for granted as you need this because that's your survival is dependent on this. So how much more sex? But I do understand because sex is a bit more trickier than that. It's not that there have never been any cases where somebody died for a lack of sex, right? So there's no such cases ever in the history of humanity. But there are many, many cases, obviously, most recently in the 80s, during the AIDS epidemic, when people do die of too much sex, right? And a lot of it is caused by psychological conditions to the side, because there's a lot of psychological issues involved with people who do behave like that. But it's also because it spreads STDs, right? People who are, not surprisingly enough, the more promiscuous they are, the higher the likelihood that they are going to catch an STD. And anyways, a lot of times people assume that in order for you to control yourself, you have to not think about sex at all. That is not the solution, right? So the solution to one extreme, which is you're constantly thinking about sex, that's the only thing that's on your mind, is not to never think about it. Now, maybe in the process of trying to process your emotions, you're trying to work out those psychological issues that you have, you might oscillate back and forth from those extremes. But the whole point is to be somewhere in the middle, for lack of a better term, right? There isn't exactly a definable middle. I don't know what that looks like, but here's an idea of what it looks like. You will be able to think about it in the proper context, right? So it's not true that the people who have more self-control in this area, by the way, this concept, again, like I mentioned, is not just applicable to sexual thoughts. There's nothing specifically special about controlling your sexual thoughts and controlling other intrusive thoughts. These skills apply to anything that you find is intruding into your mind. It is to think about it in the proper context, right? Sex, by God, it was designed for married couples, right? So a man and a woman who are married, sex is meant to be a unifier between the married couples, right? So it is the glue that keeps married people together. That is the way that God designed it. It is obviously not the only thing that keeps a married couple together, but it is like the culmination of that intimacy, right? So a husband and wife will be building that intimacy, and they will be interweaving together so much, and that is the end result of that, is that sexual intercourse, right? And so in order for you to reach that level, you have to be willing to communicate and get to know somebody from the other gender, right? So if you're a man, you are going to be talking to different women in the hopes of building a relationship with one of them and marrying her, right? And obviously, having kids. The same thing with women, like you're not going to be just sleeping around with other guys. You will be getting to know men in order for you to find a suitable husband in the future. Now, does that mean that the first person that you meet, that's going to be your husband or your wife? No, but you have to keep that in the back of your mind. If you ever hope to achieve anything long term, and if you ever hope to get rid of these thoughts and not have them control you, right? So you want to replace those bad thoughts that tell you to spread your seed, that tell you to just act promiscuous, and you want to replace that with thoughts that tell you to build depth, not just build variety, because variety doesn't do anything for you. It's building that depth, and it has its own variety, obviously, which is how a relationship is kept together, by constantly refining each other and just refining the relationship in general. So that is the real design for sex. Sex is never meant to be taken outside of that context. Anytime it's taken out of that context, almost immediately, guilt and shame is produced, and eventually it gets etched into your psyche. By the way, these are actually things that you can look up. The research is backing this up. It gets etched into your psyche, and it rewires your brain to divorce sex from emotions, which, by the way, it's not divorced from emotions. A lot of people think that sex has nothing to do with emotions. Oh yeah, it does. Those two things go together. You cannot separate them at all from each other. Every single time somebody tries to separate sex from emotions, what they're teaching themselves to do is they're teaching themselves to be cold, and they're teaching themselves to be opportunistic. And that is how you reduce the other person as to a piece of meat, right? Is when you divorce the emotion. You kind of think, I can just get sex without having to commit to the other person. And the more you practice that way of thinking, the more you're going to struggle with those issues. And the more depressed you will become, the more anxious you will become, the less fulfilled you will become. And eventually, God forbid, you get so sick of life, you just commit suicide. That is not something that I want to happen to anyone. So I hope this was helpful to you guys. I might do more videos on this, because I know there's a lot of people who maybe feel confused. I know I was kind of confused about this before too, so I had to read the Bible, speak to other people, and do my research in order to understand this topic a bit more. Hopefully this was helpful to you guys, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.